The next session will be led by Dr. Sadaf Shah, Associate Professor, Department of English, University of Jammu. Sir, please take over the session.
Thank you. And I welcome you all to this session. And we have about 5 papers. So I think we'll take questions after every paper. If anybody wants to comment or wants to, ask a question. So we'll take it after every paper. So the first presenter is Dr. R. Prabhakar and Mr. Y. Kishore. Are you there? Dr. Prabhakar, are you there? Can you
Hello.
hear me? Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. I am
Yeah.
Vaikishore.
Yeah. Do you want to introduce your title, your topic, and then start with the paper presentation? Because after your paper, we'll take whatever comments or observations or questions the participants wants to take. We'll take that. So over to you, Mr. Y. Kishore.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay. All the best.
Thank you, ma'am. Good afternoon, all. I would like to introduce myself. I am Vaikishore, Department of English, Vikram Sempur University, Nelluru. My paper entitled Portrayal of Social Discrimination in the Selected Telugu Writers in English Translations. This paper attempts to trace the defection of Dalit lives from socio-cultural and political dimensions in 3 prominent Dalit contemporary writers. One is G. Kalyan Rao, Kolokulu Reenak, Kanchailaya. These writers produce different genres in Dalit literature, present study analysis, social discriminations, poverty, exploitation, and social oppression of Dalit lives in the short stories, novels, and critical works produced by the Dalit writers. This article analyzes how effectively literature has been used to project the socio-economic concerns of Dalits. The works taken for study are Untouchable Spring by G. Kalyan Rao, K. Enoch, and Kanchailaya, while Untouchable Spring talks about Dalits in Andhra Pradesh, Malas, and Madigas. K. Enoch works highlights Dalit reaction against the upper class and imposed social constraints on depressed society. Kanchailaya works deals with Brahminical hegemony, untouchability, exploitation, and lifestyle of Dalit Bahujans. The focus of this is to analyze how these writers project socio-economic issues of untouchability, poverty, deprivation of land, and exploitation of labor. It brings to fore the discrimination against Dalits by the upper caste in Andhra Pradesh and shows how the purpose of sensitizing the readers to these issues is achieved by using literature as a tool. In this context, Dalits consider the term Dalit as an identity than a caste. Present day, they are started taking a pride calling themselves as a Dalits. The term Dalit lost its negative implications these days. Caste dominated the Hindu society and conserved as a particular section of Dalits as a panchamas and treated them inhumanly. The upper caste started detecting the terms of in socio-economic and religious aspects of Dalit lives. The oppressed people are denied to have proper source of income and one piece of land to meet their basic needs. Illiteracy and religious superstitions are imposed on deprived sections. As a result, thick darkness enveloped their lives. Through religious doctrines, the upper caste, through religious doctrines, made Dalits to believe that God is responsible for the miserable conditions. The illiteracy which prevailed the Dalit lives prevented them to produce their own literature and to give voice to their agony and misery. Gradually, Dalits raised their voice against the oppressors and exploiters and began to express their emotions and sorrows of their lives through literature. Dalit literature as agony and pain as its predominant themes. Literature becomes a tool in the hands of Dalits to project their identity and life experiences. Hence, it emerged as voice of the voiceless. Dalit literature as a purely essential, autobiographical, radical, and utilitarian in its nature. Dalit writers projected Dalit agony, questioned the authority of their oppressors and visualized utopian society where the discrimination has no place. So, untouchability is the main theme Kalyan Rao's stories. In his work, beautifully presented how Dalits are physically detached from the society. In Untouchable Spring, Kalyan Rao mentioned the Palli, where the Dalits dwell. He is located away from the Uru, which is the residential area of the upper class. The Palli is deprived of all amenities, and Dalits are made to work hard to meet their basic needs. Poverty. Dalit experience discriminations not only in terms of caste but also based on class. So the lower caste people are socially and economically backward, while the privileged sections of society are enjoying economic strength. The oppressed people are continuing their lives in utmost poverty. Next one is land labor. Paler system is prevailing in rural Andhra Pradesh. All Malas and Madigas work as a land labor, Palerus. It is called Paler. So in the estates of upper caste landlords, these Dalits have no source of income from generations together and made to depend on the mercy of their landlords. Lack of permanent source of income, Malas and Madigas accepted and surrounded themselves to the practice of bonded labor. They work hard throughout the year in the paddy fields just to earn their everyday meals. The upper caste Karanams imposed death penalty if Dalits raised their voice against bondage labor. So this is G. Kalyan Rao. Next writer, prominent Dalit writer, Kolakulur Yanak. Yanak, the reputed Dalit writer and academician, highlighted the plight of the Madiga community in his works. His short stories repeated the lives of suppressed and subjugated sections of society from various dimensions. Yanak touched hunger, thirsty, and untouchability as important themes in his works. Ancestral professions, Kolaruthi, village well, it is translated, Orabavi, pawning the sacred thread, Thakattu, cattle thief, Godadonga. So in this context, the village well is Yanak's magnanimous oppose. Orabavi is the well from which village draw water, but the deprived Madigas are prohibited to draw water from village well. Based on these situations, Yanak narrated a beautiful story through which he argued that Dalits should involve the sincere protest in order to achieve desirable social liberation and to free themselves from the purchase of untouchability. When the carcass of animals is found, a Dalit Chidambaram is suspected of foul play and attached by the upper caste. The upper caste munsib to take revenge on Ramadu's son, who is often raising voice against upper caste. Professor Yanak, with a great ability of storytelling, projected the problem, question, and also beautifully presented solution to the problem. Orabavi centered around the two important characters which represent two different ideologies. Ramudu stands for age-old wisdom of experience, whereas Chidambaram represents revolutionary and radical instinct. The writer nowhere reveals the name of a secret culprit throughout the story. Only Chidambaram identifies his wife as a culprit based on elephant note. Orabavi mirrors the two different perspectives of young and old generations of marginalized people and untouchability which envelop the Dalits. Godadonga deals with the story of Nagadu, who unveils the mystery of the cattle theft. Nagadu, who is vigilant and investigates into the case of cattle theft, identifies village head as a cattle thief but hesitates to reveal the truth. Nagadu suspects that the village head, who is the member of privileged sections of society, may escape from the punishment, and he kills the village head and stuffs of the body into the stomach of old dead oxen and thought through the itways. Godadanga portrays the reactions of Dalit against upper caste exploiters. And also the ancestral profession deals with the story of Murti. The chief priest of temples does not allow Murti into the temple with shoe. The writer beautifully used this simple idea to present the discrimination imposed on Dalits based on way profession shoemakings. And also Yanak's pawning the sacred thread, Takattu, deals with the story of two best friends, Sastri and Obilesu. They were good lecturers in government junior college. The writer in this story depicts on the society, which is the process of transformations. He highlights that the basic needs governed human life, and tradition finds to no meaning in the lives governed by basic needs. And prominent next writer, Professor Panchaileya, is a writer with new philosophical and political ideologies. These days, Aileya has become the voice of voiceless Dalit Bahujans. Why I'm not a Hindu, Untouchable God. God as a political philosopher, Buffalo nationalism in his prominent works. Why I'm not a Hindu introduced a new approach to cultural, social, professional, and historical backgrounds of Dalit Bahujans. The writer looked at the society from the productive and non-productive perception. The higher caste, which is enjoying all the privileges, comes under non-productive section. The people, those who are denied basic rights, come under the productive sections. The writer highlighted this idea and analyzed the social system based on the principles of production. The writer defined the culture of Dalit Bahujan based on their occupations and tried to reconstruct their cultural history. Earlier questioned the lack of spiritual democracy in the Hindu religion. The Hindu religion throughout the centuries imposed all sorts of discrimination on weaker sections and degraded them. Earlier reconstructed socio-cultural history of Dalit Bahujans. He unveiled the mysteries of regarding the Hindu deities and supremacy of Brahmin caste. Why am I not a Hindu? As is a socio-cultural theory of Dalit Bahujans which resulted in socio-cultural research. Next work is Untouchable God, is a social satire which attacked foibles and hypocrisies of Brahmins and upper caste in Hindu society. The author interpreted the Brahminical hegemony and Hindu caste structure from many dimensions. The first part of the novel, Peraya Saul, gave free hand to the author to depict vulnerable Dalit lives in general and psychological conditions of the suppressed Dalit in particular. The novel starts with a crime, Peraya, a Dalit series physically attacked by the upper caste. So in this context, I conclude my paper. Dalit literature is a newly emerged trend in marginal literature. Dalit writings mainly depict miserable conditions of Dalit lives and social, psychological oppressions of Dalits. The contemporary prominent three writers, Kalyan Rao, Palaklur Inak, and Chailaya, presented Dalit lives from socio-cultural dimensions. Kalyan Rao, in his Untouchable Spring, portrayed poverty, social discrimination, and exploitation of Dalits in realistic sense. Palaklur Inak, in his works, mirrored Dalit lives and discussed social problems of Dalits in detail. Ailaya, the voice of Bahujans, propounded new political philosophy and socio-cultural history of Dalit Bahujans. Ailaya is striving hard to reconstruct a social structure to liberate Dalit Bahujans from the chains of socio-cultural discrimination. This trinity is fighting for the emancipation of Dalit through their literature. Thank you, Ananda. Hello. 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 I completed my paper, ma'am.
I can't hear. Oh, there's a network issue over here. So, well, right, there's some connectivity problem that I have. So, it was a good insight into Dalit writings. So, is there anybody that wants to ask a question? Any comment, any observation from the participants, or anybody wants to ask a question? Is there anybody? I guess Mr. Vaikishore, nobody wants to ask a question. Then I have a question. Can you hear me, Vaikishore?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. It's audible.
Yeah. What theories did you apply to your paper? What critics did you apply to your paper? That's what my question is.
Sorry, ma'am. I can't.
I mean, what critics, what theorist did you apply to your paper? I mean, you read your paper in context. I mean, what theorist did you apply? I mean, to Dalit writings, like, did you apply any subaltern critic or any Dalit critic?
There are
Okay,
three
I mean,
writers I am taking in this paper.
Hanji, what have you taken?
Kalyan Rao, Kalkulurina, Kanchailaya. Prominent Dalit writers.
So my comment would be, had you, applied few critics, it would have been even more substantial, I would say. But nevertheless, the paper was very well written. It was a really good insight into Dalit writings. So I really appreciate your hard work. All the best for your future.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you.
Okay. So the next presenter is Miss Bhavna Tomar and Miss Ambika Bhatnagar. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Miss
ma'am. Hi.
Bhavna? Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Hi.
So over to you first to introduce your title or topic, whatever.
Yeah,
And then
so I'd
okay,
like to
all the
share
best.
my screen if I can.
Yeah, sure. I think they
Just a
have this
second.
facility, isn't it?
Yeah, just a second. I'll just do
Oh,
that.
okay.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. This is Bhavna Tomar from SGT University. My co-author, Miss Ambika Bhatnagar, due to some reason, she's not here, so I'll be presenting the paper. The title of my paper is Queer Projection, Paradox of Identity in Thomas Mann's Death in Venice. So I would like to start with the introduction. Since the late 1960s, homosexuality is prominent in literature, although vaguely represented, and consequently, queer identity has been likewise portrayed as ambiguous. As it procured awareness, fluidity in emotions, gained consciousness, and behavioral patterns on an individual level, thus ran counter to socially prescribed, religiously mandated, or socially prohibited conduct. Death in Venice was published in 1912. This is one of the very famous novella written by Thomas Mann. The idea of the book was actually thought of, when Mann and his wife were on a vacation in Venice, where Mann was highly fascinated by a boy in many respects, including the trip to Italy and the distant but intense infatuation with a Polish boy. Mann's story was autobiographical. By his own admission in the series of diaries published in 1970s and 1980s, where we get to know about his homosexual impulses that he has never admitted publicly. This novel is written when the social climate regarding homosexuality in Germany right before World War I was one of extreme intolerance. The objectification and marginalization of homosexuals was simply too pervasive in Germany at that point of time. The literary public's reaction to Mann's novella was positive and against towards Germany's enmity towards homosexuals. By looking at the novella's reviews just after its publication, one gains an immediate picture of the climate of public attitude toward homosexuality. One can say that this novel definitely encouraged the homosexual emancipation movement by looking at its reception. So next, I would like to go with the summary. Just a quick overview of the novel. What is there in the novel? Death in Venice is about a 50 years old famous writer, Gustav von Aschenbach, who was once married. His wife died long ago and is the father of a now grown daughter. One day, after basically being cruised, a man does not use the expression, of course, by another man on the train platform in Munich, Aschenbach makes the impulsive decision to travel to Venice, where he quickly finds himself in the grips of an obsession for a 14-year-old Polish boy of godlike beauty named Tatsuo, who is staying at the same hotel. The protagonist is what we would now probably call a closet case, someone who has long had homosexual feelings but possessed the common sense and self-discipline not to act on them. After Aschenbach sees Tatsuo, he remembers feelings he had long ago which had died out in his life's austere service and were now so strangely transformed, returning to him. Let us get into the introduction and the central idea of my paper. So this article examines Aschenbach's way of finding one's identity through sexual development from the perspective of gender studies, with a view to resolving the dichotomous understanding of gender roles, which enable multiple ways towards identity construct. The artist figure Gustav von Aschenbach goes through a process of self-discovery that is initiated by the same 14-year-old Tatsuo. Aschenbach gets into an identity crisis and begins to change increasingly, internally as well as externally. He crosses all social boundaries and transforms himself in order to please the boy. In the sense of a complete deconstruction of his male connotated identity, Aschenbach increasingly appropriates behaviors with feminine connotation, gender trouble, and finally articulates his previously deeply suppressed physicality in the form of an unusual affection for Tatsuo. This gradually turns into obsession and provokes a change in his morale. While Aschenbach finds himself, these long-established dichotomies are cancelled, sort of annulled. These body or mind or rationality or irrationality, male or female, no longer form pairs of opposites. They in fact flow into one another. Aschenbach is on a path of self-realization that exposes the human being as a hybrid. Meanwhile, sexuality plays a decisive role in the subject's conception of identity. Now, my point is that identity, therefore, does not describe as a rigid, unchangeable state, but a fragile construct that is conceived in direct dependence on sexuality, as can be seen from the example of Aschenbach. This explores foreign spaces of the soul and opens up new possibilities of being that allow a holistic understanding of identity far removed from the traditional binary understanding of the world. Mann was highly inspired by Freud and his theory of unconsciousness, some typical Freudian psychoanalytic features that are evident in the character of Aschenbach in Mann's novella, Death in Venice, which will be highlighted to further analyze the protagonist's journey of self-discovery. Freud writes in his essay Das Unheimliche about a literary motif that he calls the doppelganger. By this, he means a figure that functions as a mirror and shadow image and, last but not least, as a guardian spirit. The doppelganger can embody the instance of self-observation or the rest of the self, which becomes the object of this reflection. The doppelganger usually appear when the ego becomes problematic because it has to say goodbye to the old and has to acquire something new that is going through an identity crisis, which is, throughout the novella, happening with this character, with this protagonist. Linked with this is the idea of repression, which is the forgetting or ignoring of unresolved conflicts, unadmitted desires, or traumatic past events. An interpretation like Death in Venice is the appropriate example. Aschenbach projects his longings, agonies, and dreams for an imaginary doppelganger who helps him with his identity, work from his point of view by leading him to self-knowledge. Now let's get into the analysis of my paper. Throughout the novella, Aschenbach's character assumes and projects a conflicting dualism in various ways. Disciplined self, which comes from his professional side, and the passion. Yeah. So Freud, the concept of id and superego comes into the place here. It operates on the pleasure principle. It grows alongside the desires, the selfish desires. Ego keeps a check on that. From childhood, ego takes control of the id desires, and superego internalizes the ideals of the real world rules into our mind. It sort of keeps whispering, do good, yeah. And if it is superpowering, then the id and superego will have conflicts, and this causes that shaky personality of Aschenbach. These are the two opposing features of one's personality because of too much societal pressure. In his case, the repression surrounds his latent homosexual desires, which comes on surface when he encounters Tatsuo. Thus, he tries to channel homosexual passion into the realm of intellectual prowess. While this struggle, his trip to Venice functioned as an initiation, an act of liberation and a new one space for his longings and feelings. These desires can be traced in many of his dreams during the course of this novella, which will be picked and highlighted in this research in details. These instincts indicate that the framework of the construct of his identity is based on extremely shaky legs. Women or men define themselves through their biological gender and sexual desire, which is probably one of the most prominent expressions of the psychic self, and that they are born with these characteristics. This implies that there can only be opposite between the sexes, especially since one sex defines itself by the other, and both complement each other. The examined text refutes this. This gender difference is resolved in Death in Venice in that the literary figure Aschenbach apparently transgresses natural laws. Aschenbach does not show any gender-specific behavior. Gender roles are the stereotypes that the society imposes on each one of us, and Aschenbach breaks these stereotypes. He possesses these characteristics, strong and rational, on the other side, weak and sentimental. According to the psychoanalytic approach, Aschenbach's fantasies can be interpreted as suppressed wishful dreams that lack social acceptance. This talented, successful artist, whose upbringing could not have been more conservative, can borrow, for example, feminine habits such as applying makeup, hairdressing, etc., in order to please his lover, the young guy Tatsu. Whether consciously or unconsciously, Aschenbach resists the intolerant gender habitus that derives the identity of the individual from his gender. However, not only the gender roles are dissolved, but any rigid fixed laws are annulled. The aim is to show the construction of biological and social gender and to question it. With this, I'd like to conclude my paper. As way of classifying people's sex, these apparently neutral terms, homosexual and heterosexual, are of relatively recent vintage and only make sense against a certain cultural background. So however much they might involve genetic or biological factors, they also involve changes in consciousness and culture. In many ways, identity is a social construct, defined and given value only when evaluated in terms relative to a specific cultural context. Gender identity is not a fixed state, but a constant becoming. Each of us is as good as bad, honest and dishonest, male and female, homosexual or heterosexual. It is up to each individual to what extent they use their life to act out one or the other, or both. Thomas Mann's Death in Venice demonstrates an identity concept that can be found in constant development. Identity and gender identity in direct interaction with one another. They influence one another and cannot exist without one another. As a result, people are not, as is often claimed, derived from their gender, sex or gender, but is constituted in the course of the development of the individual and can also participate in the formation of gender. Conversely, biological sex also helps to find one's identity if it is not considered to be limited to the anatomical features. Identity is therefore a process that takes place gradually and produces different results for each individual. Deconstructive elements in the sense of queer studies force the identity work. As one said, queer comes to be understood as a deconstructive practice that is not undertaken by an already constituted subject and does not in turn furnish the subject with a nameable identity. It enables us to acknowledge the constructedness of meaning and identity and thus to begin to imagine alternative ways of thinking and of living. So it is about the decoding of the rules we have learned and the synthesis of self-images that are only based on our own desires and longings and are not subject to social constraints. Homosexuality, which is largely viewed by society as a reprehensible form of expression of gender, continues to serve as a way of self-discovery and leads to freedom and individuality, what Mann has attempted to put forth in his text. Protagonist figure results in a modernist and hybrid figure inside a conservative milieu with socio-cultural standards. With this, thank you everyone. This is the references that I have taken. Thank you for your attention.
Very well read, well written paper. So
Thank
are
you so
there
much,
any
ma'am.
comments or observations from the participants? participants? Anybody wants to ask a question or a comment or an observation? Anything? No? Then I would say very well presented. And what I liked was the way you applied the concepts of Sigmund Freud to the paper. Very
Right.
interesting and very insightful, I would say. And at the same time, properly concluded too. I mean, you did talk about the conflict and then ultimately resolving that conflict, because it's such
Right.
a stereotypical thing,
Right.
imposed by the society on this transgender, I would say. And the way
Right. Right.
you finally gave the solution, rather a conclusion to it, saying that, the conflict finally got resolved. So
Right.
I really like that about your paper, and very well read paper. It seems as if you've made an endeavor to write this paper. So very
Thank
well
you so much,
presented.
ma'am.
So okay, now we
Yeah.
have the third presenter. Yeah. So
Yeah.
can I ask the next presenter? So the next presenter is G. Praveen Kumar and Mr. K. Razor Prabhakar, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, okay. So over to you. All the best for your paper. So kindly introduce your paper and then you can start reading the paper.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, all the best.
Good afternoon, ma'am, and good afternoon to all. My name is G. Praveen Kumar, a research
Good
scholar
afternoon.
in English, Department of English, Vikramasingapuri University, Nellore, Andhra Pradesh. And my research paper is Gender, Caste and Sexual Discrimination in P. Sivakami's The Griff of Change. Uh, Palanemuthu Shivakami is the first Dalit woman writer and novelist in English. This paper is an attempt to showcase discrimination of caste, gender, sex, and violence of the Dalit woman, who exhibit the inequality and rights of men and women in the Indian society. Simon de Beauvoir says, I quote, one is not born woman, but rather becomes one. I unquote the quote. The quote states the dominance of patriarchy by making a woman an object of second sex. Shivakami's novel, The Griff of Change's women characters become epitomes of such dominance. All through born free, they are bound in the prison of patriarchy. This same patriarchal dominance has made them vulnerable by facing violence in and out of the society. While showing two different stratas of society struggling for justice unjustified. This novel writer's personal experiences with agony and shame, and it is a vibrant personal as well as collective history of the Dalits. Through the novel, the writer traced the oppression exercised by the upper caste toward the Dalit in terms of labor and inhuman treatment. Shivakami's The Griff of Change questioning communal imbalances and the inferiority of Dalits in the patriarchal dominance. This novel starts with Tangam's story and ends with Gauri's firm decision to remain a spinster after not finding any answer to patriarchy. While reading The Griff of Change, one can observe the impressiveness of narratives arising from its core sincerity. Tangam, a Dalit woman's physique bears evidence to the difficulties and violence faced by the Dalit woman. The author directly associates Tangam's body with fertility, letting her to face the thrice marginalized status in the hands of social structure, power relations, and patriarchy. Her character is skillful, depicted as a subaltern Dalit widow. Since the Dalits have forgone their identity for generations, they have been unable to identify themselves in the multitude of masters expect through caste. Their identity, their character through caste, they associate themselves with the name of their caste. Uh, this has been evidenced in the Griffith chain when Tangam introduced herself to the inspector of police. I quote, I belong to the Hindu scheduled caste community. I am poor, pariah, an orphan, a widow. I am living by working for a daily wage. I unquote the quote. The novel opens with the hustic outburst of a pariah woman, Tangam, who has been violently humiliated and thrashed by the relatives of her upper caste lover. Tangam's past is constituted by her womanhood, widowhood, the torture by her brother-in-laws when she refuses to submit them, the sexploitation by her Hindu landlord, and the molestation on her by upper caste Hindu men and so on. Her instances for share in her husband's paternal lands has been refused on the grounds that she does not have children from her husband. Her fertility being questioned and linked with the land, her brother-in-law, her brothers-in-law deny giving her share in the land but try to take her advantage as a vulnerable widow. She stays alone and it's a laborer of the farms of upper caste landlord Paranjoti Adayas, who also raped her and repeat it after finding that she is not complaining anyone. Once caught by the landlord's brother-in-law who tells it to his sister and the matter gets serious. After that, Tangam experiences extreme violence in the middle of the night by four men beating and abusing her by dragging her out of her hut with her hair. Even under such circumstances, she is supported neither by her brothers-in-law nor from any other woman or man in her community. The Griffith change gained a larger audience with wider applause. It showcases the plight of an exploited Dalit woman. Tangam, who faces triple marginalization of economy, gender, and caste. Her husband's death forces her to work in the firm of the landlord, Paranjoti Adaya, to meet the two ends of life. Her widowhood showcases her as a sexually available woman subject to exploitation by her Hindu landlord and harassment by her in-laws. Tangam symbolizes the entirely of Dalit women who are brutally treated by the upper caste landlords, yet forced to maintain silence and never raise their voice. Even her fight for her husband's share of land is meted to her body and fertility. As she doesn't have children, she is denied to the right to inherit her husband's land. Her brothers-in-law grabbed this opportunity to exploit her sexually. When they understood that she would not yield to their demands, they stopped to spread the story that she had become Arya's concubine. Due to it, Tangam is mercilessly beaten up by the landlord's wife and her brother. When her wounded self, she approached Katamuthu, a respected Dalit leader and an ex-Panchayati member, who is said to fight for justice on behalf of Dalits, but even he tries to make her best of the position he is in. When she begged Katamuthu for justice, he penalized those who abused Tangam, but later himself behaves like the upper caste man. She got justice only after she yields of Katamuthu's desires. Katamuthu betrayals comes as a terrible shock for Tangam. However, her oppressed and subjugated body helped her acquire the power in Katamuthu's house and the dominance over his two wives. The predicament of a Dalit woman victimized by the upper caste Hindus as well as their own men in different capacities not only directly affected the women's right to life and dignity but also made a strong statement on patriarchy. The total story is narrated through the eyes of a little girl, Gauri, the daughter of Katamuttu. She accuses the significant incident that happened around her. She openly criticizes the inhuman treatment of her father upon Thangam. When Katamuttu rapes Thangam, she immediately shouts, I quote, dogs, dogs in this house, shameless as dogs. I unquote the quote. The character of Gauri represents the significant growing of awareness among Dalits. Because her father, a Dalit patriarch, allows her to study, she is able to realize the exploitation of women in the patriarchal setup. So she is protests her early marriage. In order to avoid marriage, she works hard for her exam, and after getting success, she chooses to study further in the city college. When she crosses the limits of her home, resisting her father, she feels she has freed herself from the tyrannical chains. The text beautifully conveys. I quote, during floods, water from overflowing wells mingle with the waters of a hug water bodies, transgressing their boundaries. I unquote the quote. Gauri felt that she had crossed over human-made boundaries by her father. Her caste and her village are merged with the ocean of people. Gauri is critical of her Gauri is extremely critical of her father's polygamistic nature and always provoke her mother Kangavali and her stepmother Nagamani for liberation. Gauri is a difference of ideology from that of her father, a new development in the lives of the younger generation and a slow decline of his power. The novel Griff of Change has woman as a protagonist instead of a man. Shivakami is to deconstruct the novel through the depiction of Gauri as a critic and voice of the low caste people. Gauri unravels the split between what happens in a real world and in the society. She voiced the voiceless Dalit women who have been bearing the inhuman treatment silently. She calls Shivakami's daring attempt of self-examination as an instinct of realistic criticism. Through the novel is imaginary, the characters and incidents are true enough to verbalize the reality of modern society. From the beginning to end, this novel draws attention to violent relatives, sexual assaults, psychological torments, and economical exploitation, along with a note that a democratic way needed to eradicate such prejudiced ideologies from social fabric. Caste is the most dangerous aspect in women's identity. The caste bias changed her life into a very sad and painful life. The lives of all. The wicked caste has victimized the whole human community and it requires great hardship to fight war against it. Dalit women are Dalits amongst the Dalits. They are harassed to death and are denied normal life. They have to walk without reluctance into the burning deserts of casteism in search of their oasis. They are restricted even to step into the shadow of education. They get up even before the sun. They toil like donkeys carrying the burdens of their family. They have they eat the leftover, or sometimes even the leftover are not left for them. The Dalit position is consistent mainly through the external presence. The Dalits have to continue themselves to become liberated. Hope is the only solution to lead their life in the society. Only by changing themselves they can be an instrument of change. It is the time that they closed to remain as Dalits and started living as human beings, growing within them the race of hope. However, Dalits try to remember themselves decent and dignified. The higher caste people consider them only as they discriminate through they are strong and brave in their service to their masters. They are even today face different problems. The Dalits have darkness spread around them and also within them to wear a new class of hope to advancement. They have to get rid of the tone clause such as submission, intra-Dalit strife and literacy. Dalits do not identify the importance of education. Shivatami has explored not only the problems of the Dalit women in the society, but but also its shine outside of the society. The novelist has indicated the inevitability of accepting the welcoming change in the lives of the Dalits and also into the society. Shivakami says the end of the novel regret how even for a new educated Dalit woman, life still continues to be opposing and cast a marker of trust in the society. The Grief of Change is a book which should read every person to understand how women get suppressed in our caste infested society because it shows how caste and gender and sexual violence play together to shape our society. Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Uh,
Madam,
so very a nice paper, Mr.
thank you, madam.
Parveen Kumar, right?
Yes, madam. Yes, madam. Praveen Kumar.
Yeah. So interesting, because the way you amalgamated or brought a concoction of all the gender, caste, and the sexual discrimination in the work of P. Sivakami's The Grip of Change. Very interesting. Is there any comment or observation or any question any participant wants to ask? It could be observation or comment also. If you don't want to ask a question, it can be an observation or a comment also on his paper. I guess Mr. Parveen Kumar, nobody wants to ask a question. But I thoroughly enjoyed your paper, though I felt that you dealt with a lot of things in just one paper. But then the way you presented it and the way, you brought each, and there was a clarity. I could see all the three that you had taken, gender, caste, and sexual discrimination. Those were nicely, bifurcated and presented well. You kind of developed on them, on all the three. So it was an interesting paper as such for me. So all the best for your future.
Thank you, madam. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, madam.
Okay.
Thank you, madam.
So, so the next participant is R. Rashni, is an MPhil scholar. She's from the PG and Research Department of English, St. Joseph College, Tiruppalli, Tamil Nadu. And the title of her paper is Ecosystem versus Ethical System in the selected, should have been selected, novels of Amitav Ghosh. So, Miss Rashmi, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are. So, all the best for your paper.
Good afternoon, Good afternoon, everyone. This is Infant Lord Rashni doing MPhil in St. Joseph's College, Tiruppalli, Tamil Nadu. The title of my research paper is Ecosystem versus Ethical System in the Select Novels of Amitav Ghosh. So before entering into my research, I just want to give a nutshell regarding eco-criticism. As you all know, eco-criticism is a study of a relation between literature and natural environment, and it emerged in the middle of 1990s. And many writers have written many novels under the eco-critical perspectives. And in recent times, these works are termed under as climate fiction. So there are many Indian writers who pen down their works based on the importance of environment and what are all the problems we are facing today. One such most important writers is Amitav Ghosh. So I have selected two of his novels. One is The Hungry Triad and another one is Ganna Island, which is a sequel to the former one. So the objective of this research paper is seeing the eco-critical perspectives like the study of relationship between man and nature and man and other creatures like animals and also the other creatures in the island and how human culture is connected to the environment. So moving to the first novel, The Hungry Triad, the setting of both the novels takes place in Sundarbans. As you all know, Sundarbans is an island which is covered, almost 60% of the island is covered with mangrove forest. But Sundarbans has faced so many continuous trials because of deforestation, exploitation, and most importantly, pollution. So the deforestation, because of people's greed and selfishness, they used to cut the trees. But they don't understand. They think that they get benefit out of this, but they don't understand what they suffer in the future because what they do in the past automatically it reflect in the present times. You can. You can see the current pandemic situation. People are in need of oxygen. We lack oxygen because there is no enough number of trees around us. So this can be noted. And in the novel, the character called Nilima worried much about the river called Malta in the island. Not only the river Malta, but in India most of the rivers get polluted, they affected, they lost their essence of purity and freshness due to the emission of carbon dioxide and many more gases from the industries and also the wastes. And people, not many people, but few people lethargically used to throw so many wastes in the river as well as in the sea. So automatically what happens, the flow gets decreased and people are in need of water. And few decades ago in the Sundarbans, most of the people lived their life with nature. They connect themselves with nature, even from their occupation, food, shelter, everything relies upon nature. But now, with the establishment of trade, everything changed, and people cut trees and they occupy the territory of other creatures and also the animals. So there arises a battle between man and animal. So automatically there's a conflict happens between man and animal. Animal kills the human beings. So their violation takes place. The characters like Fakir and Pialira, they respect nature. They used to communicate with nature. So nowadays we are not ready to communicate with nature, ready to communicate with birds like that. But the characters in the novels, no, they used to communicate with nature. So it gives a sort of relaxation to not only to their mind but also physically also they feel so relaxed manner. And the central character called Piali Rai used to do research on the decreasing in the number of dolphins in the island. So she done her research based on that. She then realizes the reason behind all these things is because of the pollution. When coming back to the next novel, Gun Island, the author, no, he merges myth with reality, with the image of Manasa Devi and Black Madonna or the Blessed Virgin Mary. He portrays them as a kind of motherly figure, and he portrays them as a goddesses of nature because they protect the refugees and also the natives of the island. They are like a mother. So he tells like nature is like our mother because as we do harm or scold our mother also, she gives back love and care as written to us. So she doesn't scold us. She tolerates all those things. Like we know, nature tolerates all the stuffs we are doing against it. but we people are not realizing what we are doing to nature. And in the fiction, no, we can get to know the wildfire happening in the island, and it can be compared to the wildfire happened recently in Australia with the intense of heat and strong wind, no, that happened. So this is all because of not nature, but because of the function of the ethical system of each and every human being. And the most important thing we can see the difference between the island, Sundarbans in 2004 in Hungry Triad and 2019 in Ganna Island, is the domination of technology. On those days, people spend much time with nature, but with the onset of technology, um, they are with the gadgets. For example, if you sit 2 hours or 3 hours with the gadgets or your mobile phones like that, you will definitely feel stressed, and your human psyche will automatically get affected. But if you spend time in a river or seashore like that, 2 to 3 hours, means you will feel the essence of love and essence of purity from that side. So all these things have discussed in both of these novels, and the thing is, the only solution to reform the ecosystem is to reform the ethical system of each and individuals. Because what we sow, that we reap. So what we did in the past only, we are getting in the future. We are we'll get in the future, and at present also we are facing those difficulties. The global crisis today we are facing is what we did in the past. And according to Newton's third law, there is a equal, and for every action there is equal and opposite reaction. Like ways only, nature can tolerate at some level only. So it outbursts a tsunami, cyclones, and hailstorm. It brings it revolt against us. So keep the environment clean and green. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, Miss Rashni, good paper. So is there any question before I start commenting or give my observations? Is there any question one wants to ask? Anybody? Or a comment or observation? It can be anything. Anybody wants to ask a question? I guess nobody wants to ask a question. Miss Rashni, I guess this is your topic. I mean, the subject for your MPhil dissertation as well, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I could make that out. But you know what I say is, it would have been the paper your reading would have been more substantial had you given us few eco-critics. Had you applied the concepts of eco-critics, though I'm sure while writing your dissertation you must be doing that, but for your paper uh, you could have taken few concepts given by the eco-critics and then applied to the paper. So one more thing, this was one thing that I found could have made your paper more substantial. But I really liked the way you, related it to the present times, to the pandemic. And at the end, you even gave the solution that, it's ultimately the nature reverting us. What bad we do to nature by giving us tsunamis and pandemics and cyclones and earthquakes. It's the way of reversion of nature to us. So whatever bad we do to nature, that's how nature gives it back to us. So that was a very beautiful lesson that you gave in your conclusion. But your paper could have been more substantial had you added few more eco-critics, and I'm sure you must have done while writing your dissertation. Otherwise, very well done.
Thank you, ma'am.
So all the best for your future.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Bye. So now we have the last paper. That's by Miss N.S. Jiva and Dr. P.V. Annie Gladius. I do not know if I'm correct. I'm pronouncing it correctly.
And the title of their paper is Rethinking Nature Conservation, an Eco-Feminist Approach of Barbara Kingsolver's Animal Dreams. So are you there,
Yes,
Doctor?
ma'am.
Yeah,
Yes, good.
okay. So you can take over.
Yes,
All the best for your presentation. Yeah.
yes. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm NS Jeeva, research scholar, NMCC Nesamani Memorial Christian College, Marthandam. And today I'm going to present a paper on rethinking nature conservation and eco-feminist approach of Barbara Kingsolver's Animal Dreams. So the agenda first is about the introduction, then novels of Kingsolver, then importance of literature, then eco-criticism, eco-feminism, then culture and nature in Animal Dreams, then last one is the conclusion. So about this Kingsolver, Barbara Kingsolver was a famous best-selling writer and eco-campaigner. And he was Orange Prize awardee. He was born on 18th April 1955 in Annapolis. His novels are The Bean Trees, Animal Dreams, Pigs in Heaven, The Poisonwood Bible, Prodigal Summer, The Lochna. So his awards are American Library Association Award in 1988, New York Times bestseller list in 1993, Pulitzer Prize and Falker Award in 1998, and Orange Prize for Fiction in 2010. And in my paper, the abstract is here, that diverse facts of nature and culture or intervene with each other. Any adverse effect of one will be reflected in another. Eco-criticism focuses on the association between human and non-human in literature, whereas eco-feminism is concerned with the relationship of women and nature. So here on this, Barbara Kingsolver is an eminent American writer who portrays nature from the perspective of women in her writings. In the novel Animal Dreams, the author exhibits the perception of nature and its invasion into culture. An attempt has been made to explore women's participation in the protection of the environment to maintain the sanctity of nature. The writer, through the ordinary character, shows how the environment is saved with the contribution of the interrelated communities. Furthermore, this work illustrates the committed and astute nature of women in accomplishing their mission to make the environment clean and free from pollution. And what are the key words I have used here is ecofeminism, interrelated community, environment, protection, and culture. So next one is nature conservation. So here, eco-criticism deals with the study of the relationship between human and the natural world in literature. It's a platform to discuss about the reaction of individual towards nature. Man is attempting to alter the earth for his own selfish gain. On the one hand, there is technological development, but on the other hand, there is a resource plundering in the name of development. In exchange for the devastation of natural resources by man-made means, nature adds to a slew of disaster to human lives. This is evident from the exploitation of and destruction of the vital resources for the sake of the economic growth of the country and urbanization. Man's invasion of land, water, air, and sky have been going on for a long time. This leads to the disaster in human life, which include climate change and other consequences like rising temperature and sea level, loss of seasonal rainfall, and landslides. Eco-criticism focuses on criticizing environmental policies and emphasizing the importance of environmental concern, such as saving the earth and restoring it. The society and the environment are intertwined with women and ecology. Ecofeminism is the study of relationship between women and nature. Nature reproduces itself in the same way that women are the dominant force that reproduces mankind. Through their literature and works of fiction, ecofeminist writers speak out against natural resource vandalism. The essence of their writing revolves around the devastation of the environment as well as the ordeal faced by women. Most of the eco-writers encourages people to live in harmony with nature as a peaceful way of life. So next, Barbara King Slover is a reputed American writer. Barbara King Slover is a reputed American writer, has been awarded with the Orange Prize for her fiction. She is compassionate, thoughtful, and actually involved in the plight of others since her childhood. Many of the characters and events she introduces are symbol, historical, and real-life representation. She has touched on many social issues in human life, such as insecurity, male dominance, migration, and so on. So nature conservation is a moral philosophy and a conservation movement dedicated to the preservation of natural resources, habitats, species, and the environment. Anthropogenic activities such as urbanization, deforestation, exploitation of agricultural land, and pollution have an impact on the ecosystem, resulting in the climatic change. Climate change has resulted in a loss of seasonal rainfall, monsoon precipitation, rise in temperature and sea level, and flash floods. All these vulnerable are directly associated with nature and disrupt the structure of nature. Preserving nature and right proportion of land usage for agriculture is a challenge. Maintaining the life cycle of ecosystem and the sustenance of biodiversity is critical to the conservation of nature. Evidence-based conservation focused on environmental protection by conducting experiments and adapting policy based on the results. Many environmentalists advocate for the target of protecting 30% of land and sea territories. Animal Dreams is one of the best novel of King Slover written in 1990. She portrays the intricate web of human life and relationship. It's a novel about the life of a young girl named Cosima or Cody. Her return from a childhood to grace is haunted by memories of the past due to her displeasure with the people and place. The two main characters introduced by King Slover are the sisters Cody and Hallie. They live close to each other and are dedicated to separate. Hallie chose to live in Nicaragua in order to help the farmers throughout her agriculture expertise. Cody returns to her hometown to care for a deceased father, Homer, who is suffering from an early stage of Alzheimer's disease. Cody's night shift work and mental stress adds to her sense of helplessness in caring for her father. Hallie's letter to Cody dispels her doubts and encourages her to join the people fighting to save the nature and the environment. Hallie's death and Cody's resolution to return to grace continuously constitute the main emotional climax of this novel. She lives a miserable life as her father was afflicted by the Alzheimer's disease, lost her baby, her mother, and her sister Hallie. King Slover exposes how Cody is afflicted by the betrayal of her father and boyfriend. She feels despondent and uncertain about her life. She is discouraged because she is unable to forgive her father and her boyfriend, Lloyd. As a biology teacher, she always does her duty wholeheartedly. She teaches the students not only theoretical concepts, but also through hands-on experiments. Cody was always interested in the environment and would often test the microscopic level of the river water. When she sampled the river water, she discovered that it had no microscopic content and was thus unfit to drink. Cody is shocked to find her pH level than battery acid. The river has been contaminated as a result of the Black Mountain mining operation. Sunit Parekh opines how politics can influence the environment. King Slover differentiates the role of men and women through her character in the novel Animal Dreams. When Cody addresses the problem with men, they are reluctant to show the interest against the mining company. But the women valiantly involved to protect the culture and the nature. David Forgus describes the culture and society or intervene. The literal level of people grows in turn with the projection of the culture. The novelist portrays Cody as an eco-feminist who is involved in grace-based women groups, Stitch and Bitch, in order to protect the environment. The people of Grace make peacock-shaped pinatas to celebrate the culture on special occasion. This group decides to make a peacock-shaped pinnata with a note of history of the town, Grace, and presenting the problem of the mining company. The appearance of the women with pinnatas drew the awareness of the public. They raised funds for legal proceedings through their promotional activities and successfully accomplished their task of raising awareness. King Slover focuses on creating a community-oriented forum for discussing green issues and women employment. Through the character code, she educates people about various issues such as American intervention in Nicaragua and water pollution in Greece. In this novel, the author does not mention street names, and official street names are completely ignored. Environmentally based concepts of calling places through community named for locals, and unspecified street names, the narrative identified the places. Cody describes settlement in Animal Dream as torn up when Black Mountain chased a vein of copper and claims that not even a graveyard was sacred. In the novel, the old man criticizes the leaching operation of the mining company that pollutes Gray's orchid. Regardless of their profession, King Slover emphasizes the importance of building interconnected communities. Men working on the railroads, Pinnatas groups, people sneaking food in Homer's hospital, MTV abused teenagers in Cody School, and Lois Pueblo family are examples of micro communities. Each group has its own interests, but they are intervened in terms of water supply and the threat posed by the mining company. These communities' interests may overlap, and they may have shared concern for health and the environment. The women's communities in Grace are not isolated and have connection with other people in America. They used to broadcast knowledge of the situation on television so that the whole people of America was aware of the environmental problem on local, national, and global scale. Cody enlisted the help of her sister Hallie to address the storage of local water in Nicaragua and nearby, raise awareness throughout the continent. King Slover exemplifies the women community's dedication and tireless effort to make 500 peacock pinnatas in 10 days in order to articulate the inherent value of nature. When the mayor of Grace failed to publicize the cause in a local newspaper, the Stitch and Bitch community group decision to accompany the peacock and display the pinnata along with city roadside demonstrate the organizational and astute skills. Peacock also represent the importance of preserving the past in order to preserve the future. This obviously demonstrates the women's unwavering commitment to the intended action in defense the threatened environment. Cultural identity. Cultural identity is a part of person's self-conception and self-perception and is related to nationality, ethnicity, religion, social class, generation, locality, or any kind of social group that has its own distinct culture. In Animal Dreams, King Slover argues that women always have a natural tendency to preserve culture and nature. Men are the ones who make excuses for and even avoid things that endanger the country and the family. But women are the ones who dare to oppose and protect the culture and nature. Just as water is considered sacred, so is its sanctity. If any impurities are mixed in it, no one likes it. Similarly, when it comes to culture and nature, women are the first one to speak out against it. They are the one who fight and stand up for what they believe in. At last, I'm concluding my paper with the nature and culture are intervened with each other. An adverse effect of one will be reflected in another. Similarly, King Slover connects culture and nature to the female form. The author is a firm believer in the power of women to preserve culture and protect the environment. Thus, in Animal Dreams, the author represents how the natural environment can be conserved by a small group of indomitable women. So, thank you. My presentation gets over. These are my references from where I have taken all the sites.
So, yeah, very interesting paper.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Miss N.S. Jiva. Again, I guess this is the topic for your research.
Yeah,
For your,
yes.
yeah,
Yes, ma'am.
I could make out that. But very well done. It's interesting, because today is the world of eco-criticism.
Yes.
And when you bring that eco-feminist perspective, and when a woman is doing, though I might be sounding a little feminist, but then I feel when women do it, they add their own, this thing also to the conclusion, to the findings. But nevertheless, very interesting paper. And is there any question first, before I conclude? Is there any question anybody wants to ask, or any observation or any comment that anybody would like to make? I guess, Miss Jiva, there is no question.
Okay.
So all the best for your future, for your PhD. Very well done. And I'm sure while doing your PhD, you must have applied few critics also. It would have been interesting had you brought them, but nevertheless, it was a good paper.
Okay.
So, yeah. So, yes, ecofeminist perspective is always dear to women, and the way we bring it out. With due respect to the men who are here, who are working on this topic, they do equal justice. But then women, I feel, are more passionate about such topics. Very well done. And I conclude my session with this. So before I end, I just want to thank the organizers for having given me this opportunity. All the papers were very interesting from different perspective, and the insights, I would say, uh, were were really fruitful. The findings, I would say, were very fruitful. All the conclusions drawn were substantial. I thoroughly enjoyed all the papers that all the participants read, added to my knowledge as well. Uh, so all the best to all the participants. And once again, thank you organizers for having given me this opportunity, and looking forward to many such, opportunities where I get to learn so much. So thank you, and over to you.